Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the final module of our Intro to Criminal Justice class. Yay! I wanted to take a moment to thank you all for being understanding with my lack of instructor videos over the past 2 weeks. I actually sound completely normal now. I don't feel 100% yet, but I sound a lot better, so I feel okay getting on here and doing these videos. So thank you again to those of you who reached out to me with the well wishes for getting better. I really appreciated it. Um, I also want to note that please remember this next week and a half, everything is kind of moved up as far as your due dates for your discussion boards and for your final exam or exam number 4, and then your popular media paper. So your responses for Chapter 10, which the discussion board, your original post is due this evening. The responses are due by Wednesday, and then immediately on Thursday, your Chapter 11 original post is due for your discussion board. So please keep that in mind. There's no like little grace period, no little chill time in between there, not grace period, for you to be able to kind of take a break. But on the plus side for that, another benefit is that we're almost done with the class. I told you it was going to go quickly. So what I want to cover with you all today is some information on probation and incarceration, specifically jails and prisons, that chapters 10 and 11 cover more in depth in your text. So I'll briefly go over some information about all of those things, and then I'll have another video this week posted before the chapter 12 information is due, before the chapter 12 original post is due. So probation. Probation is the most common method of sentencing in the United States. First and foremost, it saves scarce tax dollars that might be used for incarceration. It allows offenders to receive rehabilitative treatment that they might not receive in jail or in prison. And obviously, it gives offenders a second chance to integrate themselves into community and into their communities and start living a more pro-social life. Probation itself, as I stated before, is a criminal sentence, and it does entail the conditional release of a convicted offender in the community under supervision of the court, usually with a probation officer, where they have to meet specific certain conditions for a certain amount of time, for a set amount of time. Originally, probation was intended to give nonviolent first-time offenders a second chance, and it has really become a good tool used in maintaining the levels of the prison population. As we know, we are still in a period of mass incarceration. That's why you see so many more people on probation than you even did before. It's because we're still using all of the sentencing structures that are available to us, at least within the criminal justice system that are available there. But there are going to be a lot of probationers out there just to help maintain those prison population levels. So in probation, a contract is generated between the state and the offender, in which the court actually details the rules that the offender must comply with during the probationary term. Failure to abide by these rules set by the court, can result in a revocation of probation, which is really an administrative act in response to the violation of the contract by the offender. Some of the standard rules include not leaving the jurisdiction without permission, or failing to comply with the requirement to enroll in rehabilitative treatment. This is usually specific to the offender and can be anything including education, counseling, community service. It can be parenting classes, anger management classes, anything along those lines. More than half of probationers are directly sentenced to a term of probation. And some are also granted a suspended sentence, which is a prison term that is delayed while a defendant serves their time of probation. And if the prisoner is able, or excuse me, if the offender is able to actually complete their probation term without getting into any further trouble or violating the terms of their probation, then the prison sentence is terminated. There's also something called split sentences, where an offender is required to serve part of their time in jail and part of their time on probation. But probation generally involves two parts. It looks at supervision and services. In some states, probation services are administered at the state level, and in other states, probation services are administered at the county or district level, usually attached to a specific court or a set of courts. Some states also combine their probation and parole services into one department. Within the probation department, though, probation officers are really like the worker bees. They're the grunt workers. They're the ones who are giving the direct services to their clients, to the offenders, who are making the decisions on whether or not they are complying with the terms set in their probation, or on whether or not they have been successful in probation. And obviously, different probation officers approach their jobs differently. Some probation officers really believe themselves to be social workers, where they're assisting probationers and trying to provide them with services and give them everything that they might need to change. And some may view themselves more like law enforcement officers, where they are just there to enforce the rules and give them what they're required to give them and say, it's up to you to go ahead and make this. To make this work. Probation, though, is the most common form of alternative sentencing because it is cost effective. Probation typically costs about $2,000 per year for a person, whereas incarceration could cost up to $25,000 a year, usually more than that. So it's really cost effective and again, it helps manage the levels of the prison population to keep people on probation, have someone monitoring them in the community, and in the long run, it's better for the community and better for the offender as well. Generally, probation is successful. More probationers are not revoked because most probationers are not revoked because they committed another offense. Most are revoked on technical violations like not attending a required treatment session or missing community service hours or something along those lines. On the other hand, though, it has been proven that probationers are more likely to continue treatment than incarcerated offenders post-release. So there's something about staying within the community and being able to monitor yourself and get through that yourself that is actually shown to kind of work. A number of jurisdictions across the country are actually experimenting with different improvements to probation. A number of these are covered in your text, but some of the ones that really stick out are area needs. Some experts suggest that probation caseloads should be organized around area needs rather than client needs. So, for example, probation officer may be assigned a caseload of probationers near where they actually live. And in doing so, these officers may be better to able to understand and utilize community resources. This goes very close in hand with community policing methods. There's also specialized probation, where some probation departments are experimenting with focused or specialized probation, where probation officers would focus on, for example, one type of crime, whether it's drug offenses or domestic violence offenses, rather than dealing with a mixture of different offenders in their caseload. This allows them to get kind of more focused and find out more specific things that particular community needs, those particular people need to continue to succeed and not to reoffend. Of course, something that's always big within probation offices as well are swift and sure punishment. By funding and better enforcing swift and sure punishment, as far as using things like urinalysis or blood testing or anything along those lines, where offenders, or those who are on probation, can actually get tested quickly and caught quickly if they're violating, it holds people better accountable. So that's some of the stuff that's going on with probation across the country. Moving on. Chapter 11 looks specifically at incarceration. It's looking specifically at jails and at prisons. First and foremost, there is a big distinction between prison and jail. Prison is for felony offenders with at least a year on their sentence to serve, whereas jail is for misdemeanor offenders with less than a year to serve. Jail also typically holds accused offenders and those awaiting sentencing. Sometimes probationers and parolees on revocation are also housed in jails, and usually jails are not properly funded, and as a result have some kind of bad conditions because it's just not a priority of local jurisdictions to put their funding into services and housings within the jails. So obviously this means that there's typically less services granted to people who are in jail than those who are in prison as well. In United States history, the first orderly penitentiaries were developed in Pennsylvania by William Penn. Penn moved the public administration of justice, like floggings and public torture, to the prison. He transitioned to a closer to what we understand as the prison format today, from a desire to make punishment more humane. However, through the 19th centuries, prisons became, again, brutal and corrupt places. Contract systems where prison officials, sold inmate labor to private businesses, and convict lease systems where the state leased prisoners for a fixed fee were the norm. Public concern for these issues, though, led to standardized procedures in prisons and to the paramilitary structure and management that we see today in the prison system. In 1870, Wines and Dwight provided a forum for professionals to actually discuss what they wanted to see in prisons, where they saw the need for treatment and education and for training and the start of rehabilitation. In the 19th century, reforms began to take place when we saw the abolishment of prison labor on the open market in many states, and more communication between prisoners was allowed. In the 1960s through the 1980s, a large number of rights were granted to prisoners, while the prison population also began to grow. Due to this growth in the population, there started to be a turn back away from rehabilitation as the focus of prisons, and you also started to see violence begin to increase, which is kind of, from all of the other things that were happening as far as the population increase and the turn away from services. Currently in the United States, there are about 1,700 public adult correctional facilities and state prisons, roughly 100 federal prisons, and 250 privately run prisons. Prisons are actually organized by minimum, medium, and maximum security. There are still some supermax prisons as well. We used to hold Illinois State used to hold one of the biggest supermax prisons in the country, but not any longer. It has been downgraded to a maximum. And we also see things like prison farms and boot camps that are used in the U.S. as an alternative to a prison, but something a little bit more difficult or tougher than halfway houses or probation. Many times with community corrections, you'll see that the contracts that are held that link people to these services have lower standards of care than maybe what people would actually be getting in prison. Okay, well, I think that's all I got for now. I know that was a lot very quickly, but I wanted to fit it in my time limit. As always, if you guys have any questions or concerns about the material, this is really my wheelhouse. Corrections is obviously my thing. So please feel free to reach out, and I hope to hear from you all soon. Have a great day.